Hello everybody, my name is Sven Hugdahl and I'd like to talk to you today about Christian Science started by Mary Baker Eddy. Just want to get into that a little bit because of a lot of the sects that were beginning to rise out of the post-Civil War era, and this is just a really interesting church. In conducting research on Christian Science and its founder Mary Baker Eddy, I consulted a few different sources, including Mary Baker Eddy's own Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. This final edition was written in 1906. I also looked at some other pieces that might have shed a little light on who Mary Baker Eddy was as a person, including I Want to Believe, a short psychobiography of Mary Baker Eddy, and also a piece by L. Ashley Squires called Christian Science and American Literary History. To start off, just a little bit of background on Mary Baker Eddy herself. She was born in 1821. She had some Calvinist father who obviously believed in the sovereignty of God over pretty much everything, including illnesses, which we'll get into in a second. She grew up, in fact, with a lot of childhood illnesses, and she questioned whether or not these illnesses were in fact the will of God. In around 1862, Mary Baker Eddy met a man named Phineas P. Quimby, and he was considered a mental healer, and that was in Portland, Maine. And so people think that he had a big influence on her, and it's said that in 1866 she ended up discovering the principles of Christian Science after she had an accident on some ice and was able to heal herself. In the 1870s, Mary Baker Eddy wrote her book, Science and Health, later to be called Science and Health with the Key to the Scriptures, the final edition in 1906. Christian scientists are not supposed to deviate from the doctrines therein. In 1881, Mary Baker Eddy moved to Boston and established a large church. It was called the First Church of Christ Scientist, later to be called the Mother Church. And by 1911, the year after Eddy's death, there were 1,190 churches and societies started in the United States and 72 others in other Protestant countries. And so basically, Christian Science grew and continued to grow into the 20th century. So you may be wondering, what exactly is Christian Science? Well, Christian Science teaches that basically matter is unreal and that evil, sin, sickness, death, they're all bad beliefs that can be overcome by the power of God through prayer and through the power of truth. And Christian scientists follow what they call a reconstruction of the miracle teachings of Jesus. And their whole goal is to be helping patients to realize that God created human beings to be perfect, and therefore they could not really be sick. In fact, Mary Baker Eddy believed that all pain, maladies, illnesses are all an illusion. When she was 10 years old, Mary Baker Eddy claims to have had an experience of hearing the voice of God and likened that experience to that of Samuel in the Bible. At the age of 12, Mary Baker Eddy claims to have stood up to the religious establishment in her church, whereby she moved the entire congregation. This is very similar parallels to Jesus when he was 12 years old in the temple doing his Father's business. One of the interesting doctrines of Christian Science is something that refers to animal magnetism. The idea that you can harness energy of the mind to control the body and heal the body. Well, interestingly enough, one of her husbands died in 1882 of heart failure. And Mary Baker Eddy said that the reason he died was because of what she called malicious animal magnetism. The idea that it was the reverse of animal magnetism. And instead of the mind being used to harness energy to cure, it was inverted and used to harm or even kill another human being. Obviously, a lot can be said about Christian Science, but a few things really stood out to me. One is, it's obviously a controversial religious system. The second thing that stood out to me was Mary Baker Eddy and her rivals. She definitely had some interesting situations with people who were close to her, people who claimed that she was a charlatan, uh, some lawsuits, things like that we can get into. Was she delusional? Did she actually harness God's healing power? I'm not quite sure. Is Christian Science scientific even? And is it even Christian? And so these questions and more surround Mary Baker Eddy and Christian Science.